We're back, guys. Part 2 of Cruise Control Insane Mother-in-Law Strikes Again. This time at the honeymoon. If you want to find part 1, you can find it in the description below, guys. Let's get right to it. A bit of an update on the request from Cruise Control to meet. I showed dear husband a couple of the responses that I agreed with, and he pretty much said, I don't feel ready yet. And I want to do some therapy first. I think I'll handle it better if I'm feeling prepared. We haven't decided on the response to the text. We'll do that tomorrow after therapy. Okay, so in the last installment, we made the absolutely insane decision to convince my mother-in-law that we're already married, just to get her off our backs about wedding stuff. We had a vague idea that we would do, quote, just a reception later, or we would elope for real. Depending on whatever we wanted to do, of course. The truth was that we really did not feel like getting married at the time. Cruise Control has sucked all the joy out of our engagement, and our inability to stand up to her just highlighted how not ready we were. Cruise Control vacillated between being smug because she was, quote, the only one who knew, and then being angry because we stole away her opportunity to plan a wedding for us. She would give us the silent treatment on and off, but she could never really stay away for long because we were 100% of her social life. I guess Netflix could not sustain her forever. We finally told her that we had accidentally let the truth slip to my parents and father-in-law, so that she could get to keep feeling special that she was trusted with this information, and they only found out by an accident, hee hee. I did this because I could not stand her comments about how she was closer to us than my mom was, because my mom didn't even know. If only she ducking knew that everyone knew the truth but her. I needed the intrusive thoughts about smashing her head into the floor to stop. Meanwhile, dear husband was in therapy for his anxiety issues and trying anxiety medication for the first time. We scheduled time together to reconnect as a couple, and often chose activities that Cruise Control doesn't like so that she would not attempt to join. We became a lot closer over those months, even though they weren't all great. We were unhappy with how things went and could not decide on how to handle the, quote, real wedding, and whether we felt ready to get married for real anytime soon. Meanwhile, my mom was being a huge help to me. I would visit her when I could because she was helping me sew my dress. I'm not much of a seamstress, but I'm decent. She's very talented and she helped me out tremendously. I decided I did not want my dress to be made of a fussy fabric that would wrinkle easily, and I did not want a big old poofy skirt. I also did not want anything strapless or a corset. I wanted to be comfortable on my wedding day. She talked me through my messy feelings about the wedding that wasn't and was the voice of reason that I solely needed. The dress we made was our inspiration for our wedding. We ended up with a dress that was beautiful yet practical, made out of fabric that was machine washable and did not wrinkle easily. I'll get to that later. Well, one day Cruise Control showed up and barged in. Started telling us that we had to have a reception and that she had a sort of list of venues. And we were going to hear her out because we owed her. Dear husband looked at her like she was crazy and just said, Ugh, Mom, what are you on? Why do you think we owe you? She blubbered out how we take her away from opportunities to plan her kid's wedding. And he said, Mom, you need to let it go. It was never your wedding to plan. I know it hurt your feelings, but regret parents and dads are completely happy for us. You're the only holdout. She gave us an infuriating rebuttal about how it's because she's actually invested in us, and my parents and father-in-law don't care. Future husband said, they care a lot, but they also know that the wedding was about what we want. This was huge, huge improvement for dear husband. I'd never see him just take the reins and confront her like this before. It was the first moment that I felt truly happy and excited about marrying him again. This was 4 months after the, quote, elopement, so I felt that it was promising. That night, we finally let ourselves talk about wedding plans, and we came up with a few ideas that excited us. I remember lying awake that night and coming up with plans because I was so excited that I could not sleep. Well, we finally decided on a plan around the time the dress was done. We would have our, quote, late honeymoon that summer, and it would cross my country road trip. We would bring a camera and a tripod, and we would take wedding photos, with me in my dress and dear husband in whatever he was comfortable with, in as many locations as possible. We'd end up with an album of fun and silly photos, and finally get to go on a road trip we dreamed of for a long time. We would get married at some point during that trip, maybe in Vegas. I talked it over with my parents, and they still wanted to have some sort of gathering with family to celebrate, and we decided that we'd do a bon voyage party. We would invite everyone, dear husband would get his first look at my dress, and we'd have a booze and great food. I liked this idea a lot. It was a bit like a casual wedding without a ceremony. I've never liked the idea of doing vows in front of people because I feel that it's really between the couple anyways. Cruise control is told that my parents, who, excuse the duck out of me, but they are the parents of the bride. The reception is their territory, but she told them the bon voyage party. She boycotts it because father-in-law and stepmother-in-law are invited. So, we did not get married that day. But we had the groomsmen and bridesmen in their dresses and suits. We had the food and the speeches and the cake, and everyone dressed up nicely. It was very short notice, so it was a small gathering. But we both have most of our family and friends in town, so it did not matter much. There were 53 people that made an appearance, which was plenty. It was held in my parents' lake house. It had room for many of our guests to sleep over if they were too drunk. It was a ton of fun, and we all loved it. The weather was great, so we got to spend a lot of time outside. It was pretty cheap, too. I'm glad we did it because I have professional photos of dear husband seeing me in my wedding dress for the first time, and of us surrounded by our family. Minus cruise control. Well, cruise control did not feel it was important to show up because it wasn't a real reception in her mind. She always thought that we'd let her do her own reception later, and she'd do a better job than my family did. Nope, never happened. She also did not like the idea of us going camping on our honeymoon. Ooh, gasp. And then turned her nose up at a party meant to wish us well on our travels. Yeah, we have great photos from the road trip, and I would wear the dress and hold a bouquet of fake flowers that we got from a craft store. Dear husband would wear something silly that showed what we were doing and seeing at the time. And my favorite one, dear husband's wearing snorkeling gear. The dress has some dirty stains that won't come out, but I feel that I got a lot of use out of it, and I don't regret, quote, ruining it one bit. What I do regret is cruise control's convincing us that we deserved a much luxurious honeymoon experience, which turned out to be a huge trap. I'll get to that later. What's up, guys? I hope you're enjoying this update. Mr. Reddito here. So I have 2 more parts that we're going to get into. The next part is called Cruise Control Crashes Our Honeymoon. And just when you think things can't heat up anymore with this mother-in-law, oh, she does something insane. Guys, if you're not subscribed to the channel, just know, I post stories here every single day, and you can find my other channels in the description below. Make sure you subscribe to all 3 channels for an infinite supply of Mr. Reddito. And let's jump into part number 2. Quickly, before I get into the story, cruise control is putting weight back on, and we're on a strict you only get contact if you behave system. That would take another post to explain. We're working on it. I'll post later. Anyways, no. She was not held involuntarily as an inpatient, but she has mandatory therapy now. Yay, I hope she benefits from it. Last time I posted about Cruise Control's wedding shenanigans, dear husband and I had lied to Cruise Control about everything so that she would not sink her claws into our wedding. We called our reception a bon voyage party and claimed it was to celebrate with everyone before we had our honeymoon. Well, after we faked eloped, we both considered that party to be our wedding, and Cruise Control did not think it was important enough to show up. So, we didn't have to deal with her. Cruise Control was mortified when she found out that we would be camping on our honeymoon. For the record, we did not camp the entire time. It was maybe 60-40 camping in hotel rooms. She begged us to consider taking a cruise or staying at a resort instead. There was only one suggestion she made that we liked the sound of. Dear husband's aunt, not actual aunt, but an old family friend who likes the second mom to him, had moved to a beach town and taken over a small hotel, and had been in her extended family for a long time. As a wedding gift to us, she would give us free stay in one of her rooms. I'd also get to meet a person who had been important to dear husband's childhood. He would get to reconnect, and it was not at all out of the way on our trip. It happened to be a good halfway point between the two places we planned to see. Dear husband called this lady, who I'll call Aunt. I remember sitting next to him, so I know this exchange happened. He said that he would really appreciate it if Aunt did not share what days we were staying with Cruise Control. Because, well, he was pretty sure that she would try to crash our honeymoon. She said, "Oh, honey, I know exactly how your mother is. Don't you worry." Aunt had been the voice of reasoning with dear husband when he was a kid, he told me. Supposedly, she had a way of getting her back off and calm down. He spent many an afternoon at her house to escape Cruise Control looking over his shoulder while doing homework. She sounded like his guardian angel. So, we showed up at our stop in the little hotel and we had dinner with Aunt. Dear husband enjoyed reconnecting with her and she seemed lovely to me. We told her about our plans for the rest of the trip and what we were most excited to see. The next day, we went down for breakfast and Cruise Control was at the buffet. She acted excited to see us and asked us to sit down with her. We both had a total WTF look on our face and just stood there. Finally, dear husband choked out and said, "Mom, why are you here?" And she said it was a fun surprise for us because she knew we had not had much family involvement with our wedding. What? How would she even know? She skipped our reception. So apparently she wanted to show her support for our nuptials. It didn't make sense at all. It was crazy talk. She said that she knew we were sad and needed her to cheer us up. Yikes. We told her, no, this is our honeymoon and we want it to be private. You should have called us so we could tell you no. She said that surprises cheer people up, so it needed to be a surprise. We just gave up and said we had plans to snorkel. She's terrified of snorkeling and left without getting our complimentary breakfast. I sat across from dear husband at a crappy breakfast place and looked for a different hotel room on the internet. It was summer and this place was popular, so everything was steep, or it was a smoking room. We decided that we would stay at the hotel at night and leave all day for the remaining 2 days there. Cruise Control sleeps in pretty late when she can, and she claims she can't stand for long periods of time, so we were betting on her waiting for us in the lobby. We take a side exit and leave early in the morning. We spent all day out and got an amazing dinner afterwards, and then went to our room and locked the door. The old hotel had thin walls, and we could hear the doors of the room next to ours open and close. And then, we heard a knock on the door. Cruise Control saying, "Hey, lovers!" Ha! We didn't answer the door, and she gave up and went back to her room after knocking a few more times. She just said, "I guess you guys are tired. I'll see you at breakfast." I remembered telling dear husband, "I'm sorry, but I can't have any sex with you right now. This is too creepy." He said, "No, I understand. I feel the same." We heard some talking and laughter through the wall later. It was Cruise Control hanging out with her aunt in her room. We woke up at 5 and quickly packed our cameras and everything else we needed for the day. We ended up driving to another beach and getting some nice sunrise photos. After that, we relaxed, set up some hammocks, and read books for a couple hours. We swam a bit and just did our best to enjoy the day without needing to return to the hotel. We went back sometime past 10. This was our third and final night, so it was Cruise Control's last chance to see us. She was very angry that we avoided her. She knocked on the door and yelled at us to open it. I fantasized a bit about opening the door and making eye contact with her as I placed the quote, "Do not disturb" place on the door. But it was already there. At this point, we have not seen or spoken to Aunt since day number 1, and we weren't sure if she'd accidentally let it slip or if she's conspired with Cruise Control. Dear husband was adamant that she would not do that to him. Aunt joined Cruise Control at the door and said, "Kids, open up. Let's all talk about this together." Dear husband was so sure that Aunt would come to the rescue that he opened the door. They both rushed in before he could change his mind, and what ensued was a ducking mess. They both said we were impolite for sneaking around. We should be grateful for their hospitality, and my personal favorite, we're such entitled millennials, and there's something wrong with our entire generation. They had planned and rehearsed a dressing down like we were naughty kids who were needed to be lectured. Things went back and forth for a while before I said, "Hey, it's late. Please just let us sleep." Aunt said we better not sneak out, well, because we needed to check out in person. She said we could resume talking tomorrow, and she was just so disappointed in us. Well, dear husband cried that night. He was outdone, though. Cruise Control cried even louder so that we could hear her through the wall. It was so on purpose. Third and final part. Cruise Control crashes our honeymoon with help from a surprise guest. This might not sound like much, but for dear husband and me it's progress. We left town for the weekend and we did not spend weeks preparing Cruise Control emotionally for our departure. We got to make spontaneous plans, so screw it. In the last post I made that we'd just been chewed out by Cruise Control and dear husband's aunt. Not biological aunt, just a term of endearment that she no longer deserves. We were just horrible for doing things our own way during our own honeymoon. Dear husband cried after it was over because Aunt had been a normal, maternal figure until that moment. Aunt told us we'd better check out in person the next morning instead of sneaking out. I felt so wary of the situation that I packed all our stuff, except for what we needed for the morning, and snuck it out to the car in the wee hours of the morning. Morning came, and we were up at the moment our alarms went off. We could not wait to get out of there. We needed to leave early regardless because we had reservations that afternoon in our next destination. We argued over whether to turn the keys in at the desk or leave them in our room. Dear husband felt that Aunt would punish us for leaving by slapping us with a lost key fee. I said, fine. It's worth it. She'll do her best to ruin our entire day, and I'm excited about horseback riding. I'll pay whatever fee she wants. So we settled on handing the key over without saying a word and leaving. It's not like she has the power to detain us. So, we overestimated our spines. Aunt got mad when we turned to leave and said, "Aren't you going to say goodbye to your mother?" Cruise Control likes to sleep in, and we could not afford to wait for her. And why would we want to? Dear husband said, we don't have the time. Then Aunt said, paraphrase, but I do remember some choice parts verbatim, "Wow, unbelievable. You were always such a good kid, and now you won't make time for your family. You're so utterly selfish. It takes my breath away." Then dear husband says, "How's it selfish to want your honeymoon to yourself?" Aunt, "How selfish is it to want 2 honeymoons?" This is our one and only honeymoon, says dear husband. You know that. And we spoke about it over the phone. You made a promise to me because you know how my mom is. I can't help but feel betrayed by what you've done. That's when Aunt said, I'm sure your mother feels the same way. I turn to dear husband and say, let's go. This is not worth our time. She's just a ducking a-hole. Dear husband, you're going to learn a lot in the next few years. What's worth your time and what isn't. Mark my words. Dear husband and I both left disgusted after that. This interaction helped us both realize the value of the mantra, don't engage. The drive to our next destination was quiet and sad. Dear husband was upset about how Aunt behaved. He told me so many times about how she was willing shield against his mom's neurotic bullcrap for years. He would do homework at her house because cruise control would interfere with his studies if she caught him working on it. He'd go over just to get a break from her, and Aunt would greet him with his favorite cookies, oatmeal raisin crisp. She defended him against cruise control when she was being particularly insane. A commenter suggested that Aunt may have been an FM, reporting back to cruise control the entire time. It would explain why cruise control was so willing to let dear husband go to her house. I haven't mentioned this theory to him yet because I don't want him to pick out old wounds. But I'm very curious what his take on it would be. We got to our destination, set up our camp, did a quick hike, went to the visitor center, and tried to forget the morning and the day before. We drove to the horseback riding place and parked. We got out, and we literally heard cruise control before we saw her. Oh, man. Remember how we'd excitedly told Aunt about her plans before we knew that she's joined the dark side? Yeah. Cruise control was pleading with an employee to be allowed on our trail ride. The bewildered employee is trying to explain that horses are finite resources and that he can't conjure one out of thin air. So I found another employee and told him the situation. That's my mother-in-law. This is our honeymoon. She crashed. She was not invited. I want her gone. If there's any no-shows, please don't give her an empty spot. I'll ducking pay you whatever, bro. I'll pay for each no-show to give you a nice tip. He shared a quick story about his own mother-in-law to show me that he understands how it is. He called over the poor, beleaguered employee who was still being subjected to sobs, wails, and flying flicks of spittle as he explained that he would not be putting two riders on one horse. I don't know what they did, but by the time we started the ride, she was gone. There weren't any no-shows, and everyone got a big tip from me. When we drove back towards the campsite, we saw cruise control parked by the beginning of the road that loops through all the campsites. We guessed that she was going to wait for us to drive by so she could follow us, which is terrifying. Dear husband made a 3-point turn and we discussed what to do. I finally walked to the little ranger station for the rangers who watch over the campsites and told him that there's a car particularly blocking the beginning of the road and I was pretty sure that it wasn't a camper. He went over, asked cruise control if she had a camping permit. This was enough to scare her off. She drove away and we did not see her anymore at all after this. The rest of the trip was completely uneventful, especially after we turned off our phones. Aunt only reached out once after that. She sent the crappiest Christmas card imaginable. It was just her regular Christmas card that people send out to everyone, but she attached a giant sticky note to ours. I don't remember exactly what it said, but it went something like this. Christmas is a great time of year to reflect on our priorities. I hope that your first year of marriage will grant you the wisdom you need to recommit yourself to family. Don't let anyone tell you that everything ceases to matter just because someone's keeping your bed warm at night. I'm telling you, it was extremely nasty and basically made me out to be nothing but a warm hole. We decided to cleanse that particular evil with fire. I got the best revenge I could think of. With dear husband's blessings, I wrote a really long and heartfelt letter back. I told Aunt about how I'd been excited to meet her, and how dear husband was devastated and questioning a lot of his happy childhood memories. I let her know that she had irreparably damaged her relationship with him and that I was so sorry for that. She never replied. I don't think we'll ever hear from her again. Well, guys, that's the end of the wedding moon and honeymoon bullcrap. When we got home, Cruise Control pretended that the whole thing never happened. She did try to force herself onto our anniversary, on the wrong date though, so who cares? And she once stole wedding photos off the wall of her home. But that's all I got for you now. She's a crazy one. We learned so much in this update, and it just turns out this mother-in-law simply is never going to give up. The craziest part to me, though, is the fact that she worked with the aunt, who was dear husband's ultimate savior and shield throughout the time growing up. So not only did mother-in-law continue to disappoint, but she made the aunt follow too, which completely shattered the image that dear husband had of her, and I think that's pretty heartbreaking. Not to mention, this mother-in-law decides to show up during someone's honeymoon, making them feel incredibly awkward and does not even get the hints that OP's trying to give her when she does not show up for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Guys, this entire saga was insane. Let me know exactly what you thought of this part 2. Drop your comments down below how you would go about handling this mother-in-law, if you think you could. Or let me know what you would do about the aunt, who is acting out of character and is not supposed to be this crazy. Thank you so much for joining me for this. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new here, guys. Have a wonderful night, and I'll catch you in the next one.